The Toronto Raptors lose, but Jamal Shead does his best Kyle Lowry impression, pulling off the comeback. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough, but let's go to the film room. Darko Rajakovic has talked about pace when it comes to Jamal Shead and setting the tone, and I thought tonight was a really great game, a good example of what he does offensively to establish a tone for the Raptors, really getting them out in transition. You see this leak out pass to Jonathan Mobo. You see leaking out himself this time for the finish. And it was this pace, this chaos that really he created throughout the third and fourth quarter that helped the Raptors come back in this game. But he showed it off all night. In pick and roll, nice hesitation move to get Cat off his spot and settle into a floater. This time in transition, pushing it, engaging the help, and then creating an opening for Ochai Agbaji to get the dunk. This was a huge play in the fourth quarter, pick and roll, just punching the gap there of the driving lane and attacking, and it makes it a 1-point game. And he's learning when to slow down also, so it's not 100% all the time. Here he stops, gets Ochai that opening. And this is a much improved area of his game already. He's knocking down his threes more frequently. Obviously, that's going to be a swing skill for him. If he's able to knock down his threes at a high level, even off the catch, it really changes his trajectory as a player. Jamal actually talked about this play. He said he wanted to pass it out to Grady just because he's purely a better shooter, and ultimately just making the right play. Speaking of the right play, huge moment here, a minute 30 left, double drag screen, and an alley-oop pinpoint pass to Jonathan Mobo. That is that G League connection. They've been playing together a bunch. They know each other's tendencies, and to recognize that in that type of moment is huge for Jamal Shead. A little bit earlier in the game, again, pushing it in transition, finding Grady Dick in the corner. And I love when he catches it in movement and then just bursts to the lane. Like, he's really using his speed as a weapon here in this game. And I think that's really massive moving forward. It's like, yes, I can be quick, but I can also kind of be crafty with my quickness, pick and choose my spots, right? Another half-court pass here between Jamal and Bruce Brown. Watch how quickly Jamal gets this ball down the floor. 4 dribbles all the way to the basket through Jalen Brunson. And again, he missed this one here, but I think it best illustrates his pace. Watching the pick and roll as he's working to get Precious off his spot, little crossover, and then he tries to finish over him. And look, Jamal was excellent in this game. Like, the Raptors do not come close to winning this game without Jamal Shead. He really ignited them in the third and fourth quarter, brought them back in this game with a bench lineup that included Jonathan Mobo, Ochai Agbaji, Bruce Brown, Kelly Olynyk. They really brought this Raptors team back in the fourth quarter, especially after it was kind of like a weird game. I thought the Raptors were playing decently, but they were just getting dominated on the glass by Karl-Anthony Towns. And I think it was something like 20 second chance points for the Knicks in the first half. So offensive rebounding and turnovers were such a huge issue for this Raptors team tonight that it put them behind at every level. But Jamal was sort of this equalizer because he pushed it in transition. He was such a great change of pace for this team. And I know, people, even I tweeted it. I posted a picture of Kyle Lowry and I said Jamal Shead tonight, because moments like that, it does remind you of what Kyle would do in transition, where he would kind of spur the Raptors on through pushing the pace. Kyle was one of the best transition players, in Raptors history, and it wasn't because he's some ridiculous athlete, but it was because he understood what pace meant and what he could do as a guard pushing pace. Whether it was the pull-up three that he was classic at, the patent Kyle Lowry pull-up three, or whether it was just barreling his way to the basket to create an opening for one of his teammates. Jamal has the latter down. Obviously, the pull-up three and the shooting, again, is the swing skill that's going to determine what happens. It was the swing skill for Kyle Lowry, too, like especially early in his career. Knocking down that three-point shot was a huge, huge development for him. Kyle ended up becoming one of the best shooters of all time. If you look up and down that three-point makes list, I believe Kyle is in the top 20 for all-time three-pointers made. And he's climbing, So Kyle turned himself into a really, really good three-point shooter. Will Jamal do that? We'll see. Obviously, that will take some time. That being said, though, these are the type of games that get you really excited for, I think, post-trade deadline basketball for the Raptors, because Jacoby Walter had a great game. Jonathan Mobo made his return to NBA action after an extended period with the G League, and he was awesome defensively. Again, especially in that third and fourth quarter, his defense on Karl-Anthony Towns and Precious Achiuwa really set the tone in the front court. helped out with Kelly Olynyk kind of being that safety blanket, security blanket there beside him. And you get all these young guys really contributing in major ways. Ochai Agbaji was good tonight too. Crazy block, by the way, from Ochai early in the game against Deuce McBride. But overall, like, you see these young guys doing their thing. Grady had a good game as well. And it gets you excited to see these guys in extended runs. You know, we've seen brief moments and stints here and there, but I think post-trade deadline, these guys will have more extended situations where they can play every single game and get, like, run, 20 minutes, 15 minutes a night, 25 minutes a night to see what they can do. Jacoby Walters started tonight in place of RJ Barrett. Hope RJ is okay. He's in concussion protocol. We actually got an update saying, they went through the proper procedures over the last couple of days to make sure RJ was right, but just that symptoms for his concussion showed up later than what you would expect. And so they've put him in concussion protocol. We'll see how he does and when he eventually comes back. Hopefully it's nothing too serious. I mean, concussions are very, very serious, but hopefully he's okay. He'll be back soon. That being said, like, this Raptors team is now in this sort of transitionary period where, like, they have these older guys and a Bruce and Kelly and Chris and all those types, but they also have these young guys waiting in the wings for more opportunity. Davion Mitchell didn't play tonight, and it was because both IQ and Jamal were healthy. And, we've seen this in the past before where when those two are healthy, especially early in January, Davion isn't playing. And I thought the Raptors struggled tonight defensively without Davion. I think that was apparent. I mean, Davion is probably the second or third most impactful defender on this team behind Scotty Barnes and Jakob Poeltl. But ultimately, they clearly want to prioritize Jamal Shead. They clearly want to give him the opportunity to stretch his legs and develop and figure things out because they see Jamal as a long-term piece for themselves. And tonight, you can't dispute that. Like, that type of performance, you can kind of see the vision of what Jamal can eventually be for this Raptors team. Still needs to improve on the defensive end. I think at this point, I would say Jamal's defense is a bit overrated. It's sort of, resume versus actual things that are happening on the floor. Jamal was obviously an excellent defender in college, but, like, he still isn't, Davion Mitchell. Like, Davion Mitchell is a much better defender than Jamal Shead is at this point because Davion Mitchell has much more NBA experience. That being said, I think Jamal will eventually be a better defender, be a good defender, and a positive defender. So add that onto what he can do, and you have this really useful guard for the Toronto Raptors moving forward. We'll see what happens, though. And I think, that three-point shooting is a huge development for Jamal. Still, the finishing at the basket, pushing in transition, understanding pace, being able to control that pace that you play with, all of those things were there tonight, and they were excellent. I want to talk about Scotty Barnes real quick. Scotty didn't have the most efficient game. He was 8 of 23, I believe, from the field. Yes, 8 of 23 from the field. Finished with 23 points, but overall, I thought he had a strugglesome game offensively, getting to his spots. And I asked Darko Rajakovic about this afterwards. And he was basically telling me, he's like, we're trying to have those conversations about picking when and where to choose your spots and what you want to do to create advantages for others. So whether that means driving the basketball or shooting those mid-range pull-up shots, we're okay with him taking any of them. It's not about makes or misses. It's more about approach, figuring out what approach works. And ultimately, the Raptors are doing tons of experimenting with what Scotty would do. And he's doing a lot of experimenting. Throwback to December when he was taking 10 threes a game. That number has come down quite a bit. But at the same time, he's leaned into this mid-range shot more often. And it's had this, I don't want to say an adverse effect, but it's had an effect on his driving in the sense that he is settling a little bit more for those mid-range shots, not trying to get to the basket as much. And it's at this point where you can kind of take it two ways. You can talk about it from the point of they're experimenting, they're just trying things, Scotty is just trying things, or you could take it from the point of, well, at the same time, he needs to improve and try and experiment in this area, which is driving the basketball. Truthfully, I think both of those answers are correct. Yes, he needs to improve as a driver. He needs to improve at getting to the basket. He's so good at and around the basket. especially when he's stronger than the defender, that it's just clear that that's like an easy path for him to easy buckets, especially when they use him as a screener, screen, roll to the basket. That is Scotty as his best. Like, I could imagine a lead ball handler next to Scotty Barnes, a really, really crafty guard next to Scotty, and their tandem would work incredibly well. But the mid-range stuff is something that kind of, he's now leaning on it, and you want to be careful that that doesn't become a crutch. I'm not saying it is. I actually think it's okay that he's developing this and like just trying things and seeing his spots, picking and choosing his spots. Jaren Jackson Jr. last year was the only healthy guy for the Memphis Grizzlies. Ja was out, Desmond Bane was out, etc. And so they just force-fed Jaren Jackson Jr. opportunities offensively to figure out how he wants to create for his own. And now this year, he's having probably his best scoring season. No, definitely the best scoring season of his career. He's doing it on unassisted shots. He's creating his own shot more often. He's getting to that like mid-range floater bag more often because he's just massive and can kind of float it up over top of basically any defender. And so he's figured out what he can get to, what his bag is, if you will, offensively. They gave him a whole season to do that. And so I think the Raptors are in some way, shape, or form doing the same thing with Scotty Barnes. So I'm okay with this level of experimentation. But you got to find the balance, ultimately. You got to find the balance. And I think that's something that just like Thanos, balanced as all things should be type of thing. He got to figure it out. That's just part of it, part of being an all-star, part of learning who you are as a basketball player, which I think is what Scotty Barnes is doing all of this season. Folks, it was a fun one. It was a really, really cool one. The atmosphere was awesome. The crowd was so into it, like especially when the Raptors were making their comeback. That was probably, I've been to, I've been to maybe like 10 games in person this year, and that was probably the loudest I've seen it. That was probably the loudest I've heard "Let's Go Raptors" chants in like 2 seasons, which is, you can tell that like people are starting to learn the new faces of this team, and Jamal Shead and Jacoby Walter, and especially, Grady Dick has become a fan favorite. But some of these guys are now becoming not household names, but at least in Toronto, they're becoming known basketball entities. And so it's cool to see this team bubbling up in the same way that, the 2013, 2014 Raptors. Not saying that they're making a play-in run or a playoff run like them, but, developing their identity of what they're going to be moving forward in the future. Folks, fun stuff. Good basketball game. Ended up in a loss. All good. If you like the Cooper Flag sweepstakes, you got what you wanted. But ultimately, the Raptors pulled out a good game again. And I will take a good game over a bad game any day. We got 90s night on the 90s tomorrow. Grizzlies versus Raptors. Unfortunately, I'm not going to that game. That would have been a cool game to go to. But that should be a cool night. Nice little theme night for people to get excited about right before the trade deadline. We will see what happens on Thursday. Tick-tock. See you guys later. Bye-bye.